The cultural malaise we mentioned earlier certainly shows up in how Americans currently perceive their own country. A recent Gallup poll shows that 39% of Americans view themselves as intensely patriotic, compared with 71% back in 1998. How has this shift affected America and Americans, who are divided culturally and politically as never before? Here with some observations and perhaps a restorative is the Emmy-winning TV host, podcaster, and best-selling author, writer, and producer of a wonderful new film, Something to Stand For. Please welcome to the program, Mike Rowe. Mike, thanks for being here. Great to see you. I have to talk about, before we get into the movie, which I did see as a restorative, I want to talk a bit about your background. You grew up in Baltimore County, Maryland. Your parents, John and Peggy, were both teachers. Tell me about the values you learned from your folks and America at that time and how that shaped the work you would later do in this particular project.
Well, it's funny, Raymond, you don't really know the answer to that question in real time, right? It's only in getting older and looking back that you can start to appreciate or at least make sense of the impact that your folks had on you. I grew up on a small farm, a little north of Baltimore County. My dad was a social studies teacher. My mom stayed at home and raised 3 boys. But the secret sauce and the real great blessing for me was my neighbors happened to be my grandparents. And it was really just us up on this hill, surrounded by babbling brooks and a woods and horses and a barn and so forth. So I had a front row seat to an extraordinary work ethic. My pop built the house I was born in without a blueprint. And my dad sort of inculcated into his sons a curiosity and an understanding, really, of our past. And so I just grew up very fortunate with a healthy sense of curiosity and exposure to a pretty decent work ethic, which I hope I may have inherited somewhat.
Well, and I love that your grandparents were there. I grew up with my great-grandmother in our home, as well as my grandparents in my life. And people don't realize, I think, if you haven't had that experience, Mike, that they really become almost time travel, talismans for you, in that they bring the past into stark relief into the present. And there is something wonderful about that we may have lost in America, particularly the way we shuttle around and shove the elderly out of society and out of the picture, I think, too soon.
I think so too. And also I would say that if you're trying to raise your kids as a mom and a dad, you give them lessons, right? And you instill these ideas and beliefs. But if you have living proof next door from a prior generation, my dad told me much later in life, he said, I could always tell you what I believed to be true, but then we always had the proof. We had the proof of humility living next to us. We had the proof of work ethic. We had the proof of all of these virtues that mattered to my mom and dad, but they couldn't necessarily say, hey, look at us, we're awesome. What they could say is, look at your grandparents, look at what they've built and look at what they've done and look at how respected they are and so forth. So, we hear a lot about the missing dads in today's society, but the missing grandparents, I think, are even more consequential.
I agree with you. And Mike, you're so well known for your shows, Dirty Jobs, Somebody's Got to Do It. And as an advocate for good old-fashioned hard work, particularly in the world of skilled trades, how has that notion of work changed for Americans since the end of World War II to today? And how does what Americans believe about their work and purpose and vocation of work impact the culture?
It's a really interesting question, and it ties in, unfortunately, I think, to the survey that you referred to. The fact that just 25 years ago, 70% of Americans saw themselves as extremely patriotic. Well, 25, 30, 40 years ago, the majority of Americans understood the wonder of the vocational arts. We were much more connected, I think, to the big things like where our food came from and where our energy comes from. And having that kind of awareness about how our workforce works makes it a lot easier to be grateful for the electrician, the steam fitter, the pipe fitter, the welder, and all the various vocations that allow us to live a civilized life. When that appreciation, however, starts to erode, as it did when we took shop class out of high school, you get on a road to just call it a lack of appreciation and all of the things that ushers in, and none of it's good. And the link I would suggest might exist is a lack of appreciation for that part of our workforce tied to a lack of understanding or a lack of curiosity or a similar disconnect from our actual past. And understanding our past and celebrating our past, especially around Independence Day, being proud of it.
Yeah, and that's a perfect bridge to your film, Something to Stand For, which hits theaters on June 27th, just in time for Independence Day. And the film is really, Mike, a celebration of America at a time when there is so much criticism and derision heaped upon her for events really from the past or the distant past. And it's a little bit of a mystery, a little bit of a documentary. You take 9 stories that folks might not be familiar with, and through dramatizations and man-on-the-street interviews, you paint a picture of America through storytelling. Now, I know you took a lot of this from your podcast, The Way I Heard It, because I listened to it, and expanded it here. Tell me why you chose this approach, those 9 vignettes particularly.
Well, it really goes back about 7 or 8 years when I found myself listening to these old episodes of Paul Harvey doing the rest of the story. I just thought that was such a fun way, to turn a history lesson into a mystery and allow everybody to kind of play along. So I started writing stories in that style about all components of pop culture. Lots of history, obviously, but it was pretty broad, and I wrote about 300 of them. And this project happened because somebody came to me and said, look, Independence Day is coming, and there is a real patriotic theme in a lot of your stories. What if you picked the 9 most consequential stories about patriots, stories that most people don't know about people that we do, and strung them together with a field trip of sorts to D.C. to meet the park rangers who clean up our statuary and our monuments and our memorials. And look, no one wants a lecture, nobody wants a sermon, and no one wants a lesson plan. We want to be entertained. So my hope was to tell a series of short stories, put them together, and maybe leave the viewer and their families with something to chat about over the next meal.
Yeah, well, that's such a great setup, and I want to give our viewers a glimpse of what they'll be seeing. Here's a clip from Something to Stand For.
Today, people come here from all over to pay their respects. People like Andy Michael, whose daughter brought him here today.
When were you in the service? Where were you?
51 to 55. I was in Korea from March of 52 to January of 53.
Well, my dad was there that same exact time. He was there in 53 and 54.
Small world.
You weren't in the reservoir. You weren't in Chosin, were you?
Oh, hell no. I didn't want to go there.
Cold, man.
No, them guys, they were the heroes.
Mike, was that interview arranged ahead of time? Tell us how that came to be, and why was it so important to include in your mind?
It's funny that you would play that. 99% of the movie was scripted and planned and shot. We had 300 actors, all from Oklahoma, by the way. Everything about the film was deliberate and intentional. But I was standing there in the World War II memorial, setting up for a very specific planned shot. And I saw this old guy out of the corner of my eye in his wheelchair with half a dozen other old men. Their families had brought them, their friends. They were on one of those honor flights, He was just sitting there looking at all those stars on the wall and all of the sacrifice that they represented. And I just grabbed my director and said, look, let's just go over here. I want to talk to this guy. And you know, when you have your name in the title of the movie, they have to do what you tell them, right? So we went over
You made the right choice, Mike.
It's a lesson from Dirty Jobs, Raymond. You know, I spent most of my career with no script, no plan.
Right.
You know, no second takes. We shot everything very, very, very honestly on TV. Movies are different, but that moment and a few others were completely unscripted.
Yeah, and as you mentioned earlier, a number of moments in the film, they're dramatizations to illustrate the stories you tell. So just to give people a fuller appreciation, I wanted them to see, as you described, this is really the heart of the movie. Watch this. These are some of the dramatization. Watch.
Williams, on the other hand, well, he didn't have to imagine anything because he was right there to experience the reality of a 25-hour shelling up close and personal. And when a cannonball took his leg off above the knee, leaving him flat on his back, the runaway slave looked up from a pool of his own blood and saw the broad stripes and the bright stars of a flag that was still there, flying defiantly over his head.
Yeah, that was such a moving part. There are many in this film. But Mike, for some, that clip, a runaway slave who's fighting in the war for independence, that's evidence of a permanently and fatally flawed nation. There are Americans who say, starting with slavery, America is inherently racist, and that it's as bad as it's ever been now. What would you say to those Americans who have that opinion and believe that?
I would say that two things can be true at the same time. There is massive room for improvement. We will never be finished. We are never going to be a perfect country. We were founded by imperfect men, but they had perfect ideas. And those ideas, the striving for them, that's what matters most. This in no way is this a political movie or an attempt to make some sort of apology for past mistakes. It is, however, a real honest attempt on my part to say, look, we have to take measure of our progress. We have to look honestly at where we were in 1776 and 1812 and 1861 and 1941. And if we can't see the incredible progress that we've made, then I have to believe it's because we affirmatively don't want to look at it. And if we don't want to acknowledge our progress, well, then we're just in another situation. Again, there is much to be done. There is much left to do. But the idea that there's nothing to be proud of, or nothing to be grateful for, or nothing to celebrate, well, that's crazy.
Yeah. Why did you make this movie now? And who do you envision it for? Do you see this almost as a corrective for some of the revisionist, ideologically distorted history that we're hearing and seeing? To a correction of the record, if you will?
I wouldn't presume I've got the power to correct a record, but I would like for people to see as many sides of a thing as they can. And I think a lot of teachers or a lot of parents have been looking at what's happening in our schools, and they see the acronyms. You know, they see the CRT, they see the DEI and the ESG and so forth. And fine, let's look at all of it, but let's also look at the reality of who these men were, who built our country, and let's be honest about the importance of the statuary that we have today, and the monuments and the memorials, and the insanity of attacking those things and judging our forefathers through today's enlightened state. Honestly, Raymond, what do we think our great grandkids are going to say about us 250 years from now? How
exactly?
How will we be? What statues will be pulled down then? What will we think of the meat eaters, right? 250 years from now.
No.
Who knows?
Presentism doesn't stop, Mike, with us. It keeps going on and on, which is that, belief that you judge the past by the present. This is absurd. And I love that your film, though, focuses on these human stories. They are human people who are in struggle. And we see through their examples something glorious. And look, every time I see a monument, we didn't build these monuments, and our forefathers didn't build these monuments to gods. They built these monuments to broken and flawed men who may have done 1, 2, 3 great things that are worth noting. And I think sometimes we confuse the two in this present debate about what should come down or what names should be changed. We've missed the point, I think.
Well, and we're looking constantly, it seems, not just for something that we can all genuinely stand for, but we're also looking for things we can stand against. And, the thing that makes us a country, the things that make us a people, they require us to have some joint understanding of the basic facts that happened. They're, like I said, you don't, standing for the flag, standing for the national anthem, putting your hand on your heart when you recite the pledge doesn't mean you're happy with the current crop of elected officials. It doesn't mean you believe that every policy in place is good or prudent or wise. It just means that you're acknowledging we're a work in progress. National anthem was a protest song. And before that, it was a drinking song. Right? I mean, there are just so many wonderful things to learn, to your point, about the people who got us to where we are. So to celebrate the past, to understand it, that's the goal.
Well, and I love that this film does that, Mike. And what do you want people to take away from this movie? Something to stand for. And it hits theaters, by the way, June 27th. But what do you want them to take away from it?
Well, the first thing I hope is that they're just genuinely entertained. That's the point of going to the movie. Like I said, lectures and lessons and sermons, But if I could cherry pick and go beyond that, I think maybe a level of gratitude. Gratitude's an interesting virtue because like most great virtues, it's not like your hair color or your skin color or your blood type or your star sign. It's a thing you can choose. We can choose to be grateful. We can choose to work hard. We can choose to be patient and kind and all of those things. But choosing to be grateful on Independence Day, that's something we can all do as a country. And if we do that, who knows what else we can do together.
Well, and you said it earlier, a common appreciation and understanding for the country you're a part of is critical to this experiment in liberty that the founders drafted all those centuries ago. And I love that this movie, Something to Stand For, reminds us of the greatness of America and the importance of unifying America and the people in America, even with our disagreements and our differences. Something to Stand For, the new movie from Mike Rowe, hits theaters for a special engagement June 27th through July 4th from Fathom Events. Visit somethingtostandfor.movie for more information and how to get tickets in your area. Mike, thanks so much for being here. Hope you come back.
Anytime, Raymond. I appreciate it.